Hi, Kevin at Ledoux Guitars, the Pragmatic Luthier. Today I want to do a presentation on jointers and planers. And I'm compelled to do that as maybe information for new woodworkers that don't own this machinery at this point. But I think mostly because I listened to a podcast this morning from a luthier in Pennsylvania who was trying to answer questions from his subscribers, uh, asking him, should they buy a planer first? Should they buy a jointer first? Should they buy either one? And I heard a lot of confusion. And to be honest, I think he did the best he could trying to answer those questions, but I couldn't help uh, but wanting to shed some additional light on this subject for anybody that's thinking about this machinery or is not sure how they should go about this. The first thing I want to point out is that a jointer and a planer are two separate devices, and they do not do the same things. And they are at the same time interdependent. And it's important that you understand that. A jointer does one thing and one thing only. There is a jointer. This is my 8-inch jointer. A jointer will flatten the surface of a piece of wood. It'll flatten a surface. Surface defined as the broadest area of the board, regardless of its dimensions. This is the surface, the broadest area. A jointer will flatten that. After it has flattened that surface, it can also straighten this edge and make it at 90 degrees to an already flat surface. And that's all a jointer can do. It does nothing else. Now, for a guitar maker or a woodworker, a jointer is a very useful device. But what about a planer? Well, let's take a look at a planer. Here is a planer, also known as a single surface planer. There are other planers that are two-sided. There are others that are four-sided. But those are different animals, and people like myself and guitar makers especially would have no use for those. A planer can do one thing and one thing only. It can, provided that a flat surface is put on the infeed side of that table, it will draw a piece of lumber through and it will make the upper surface parallel to the surface that's on the table, which means if there is warp and twist in that board that goes into the planer, if that surface on the table is warped or twisted, it will plane the board more than likely. But when it comes out, it will have the same twist and the same warp in it that it did when it went in. The only difference is the surfaces will be smooth and reasonably parallel. So let's take a look at what a jointer does and does really well. As I said, it will flatten the surface of a board. Here is a chunk of soft wood that, if you can't see this on camera, you can hear the rattle as I'm rotating it. The surface is not flat. And neither is the opposite surface. In fact, given the grain orientation in this, you can expect that it's going to be cupped. And if you look at this upper surface, you can probably see that there is a convexity showing there. So we're going to straighten that out. But this machine isn't going to do all of it. So we're going to create a little bit of noise here, and I'm going to operate on camera so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to use the jointer first to flatten a surface. Then I'm going to put that flat surface against the fence and straighten an edge. And that will, by default, make that edge at 90 degrees to the flat surface. Okay, so there's my flat surface, and there is my edge, straight and square to it. Now when I lay this on the table, you can see that it's nicely flat. The opposite surface is not. So why do we need a planer? We need a planer to get that surface parallel to that surface. And that is the only thing that a planer does. Will the jointer make this surface parallel to this? No, it will not. And I'm going to prove that right now. So I've jointed the opposite surface. But as you can see on this edge, there is still dark color there where the knives barely touch that. It's jointed over here, but not as much here. And if you look at the cross section of this, you can clearly see that this side of the board is much thinner than this. In fact, judging quickly, I'd say we got a good probably 3/32 of an inch difference there. So a jointer is in no way can be substituted for a planer. It can only flatten the surface and it can only straighten an edge. So let's go to a planer. My planer happens to be right here. So we're going to rotate you around and put you at the outfeed side of the planer. And we're going to crank that thing up and we're going to plane this board. This was my jointed surface, the one that I jointed initially. It's nice and flat. So we're going to put this down on the table. So it's been through the planer, and now you can see, I'm not going to measure here. There's no need to really, but I think you can see that those surfaces are parallel. That's what a planer does for you. There is no substitute. So what about the question of which one of these do you buy if you're only going to buy one? And to me, that's a no-brainer. You're going to buy a jointer first. And the reason is simple. If you don't have a jointer and a planer, you're already buying lumber that is referred to as S4S. In other words, surface four sides, two surfaces, two edges. So if you want the ability to work your material more to your particular advantage, then a jointer is the logical place to start, because it can get you straight edges that you can prepare glue joints with. It can do a lot for you. It can straighten out a lot of problems. But to me, it's almost pointless to have one without the other. But there's no question in my mind that if you've got a planer and you haven't got a jointer to make a surface flat in the first place, you're pretty well out of business. And remember, you cannot, with only a jointer, unless you want to do a lot of hand planing or some other slick tricks, without a jointer and a planer, you can't go from this to this. And for me, that's imperative, because I go literally from billets and planks of rough material all the way down to whatever parts I need, whether it be for guitars or utility stuff or for furniture or, you know, even some architectural millwork. So to me, these tools are very important. If you're going to buy both machines, then I would make the planer the second purchase for sure. And I would advise that you buy nothing less than an 8-inch jointer. If you have the space and you have the dollars that you can put into an 8-inch jointer, I highly recommend it. If all you're doing is very small work, or if you're doing strictly guitar making, a small jointer may very well suit your purposes, because a larger jointer is to your advantage only in the width of material that you can surface, but also in the length that you can get flat and straight. Narrow, as jointers get narrower, 6-inch and 4-inch and so on, the beds get shorter. And, you know, a 4-inch jointer, you're going to have a hard time getting anything straight and flat if it's more than, I'm going to say, roughly 48 inches long. But for a guitar maker, that may be all you need. So what about a planer? My planer is 15 inch. And I don't see the need for anything any larger than that. And I do pretty wide work. I've laid up bench tops and so on that are 30 inches wide, and it can be done with splining and some other techniques to help you keep all that stuff flat. But my 15-inch planer has served me very well for this one. I don't know, 15 years I guess I've had this. I know a lot of people like to buy these benchtop planers, or I guess sometimes they call them lunchbox planers now. I have had the DeWalt lunchbox planer. That's what I had before this thing. And make no mistake about it, they can do a lot of work and they can do it very, very well. But they are light duty. They'll do quality work, but they're not going to do it in real heavy material, and they're not going to do it for years and years to come. So you have to make some judgment calls there. The other thing I don't like about the lunchbox planers is they're so damn noisy. They're worse than a machine planer because they rotate so fast. They tend to put out a lot of high frequency, which I find real irritating. Lastly, I want to advocate that if you can have a shop where you can have both of these machines in it, it's to your tremendous advantage. Because if you're buying what retailers have to offer and what, you know, the various lumber and luthier supplies have to offer, you've got an umbilical cord between you and them all the time. And that's something that personally, I am not too interested in having that sort of connection. I don't want to be dependent on too many sources for anything. Case in point, just a quick example. This is a log that I got, and I had it sawn, I dried it, and here I've got these rough billets and boards. I can reduce this to whatever I want, whether it be furniture parts, architectural molding, or guitar parts, because I have the equipment to be able to do that. And even if you're just a guitar maker, you know, and when I say just a guitar maker, I mean if that's the only woodworking activity you're engaged in, I still advocate that if you can bring in lumber from any number of sources and in any number of conditions, rough, finished, whatever, and reduce that to the parts and pieces and the sizes that you need, it's an advantage to your creativity, and it's an advantage to your ability to do something that is strictly unique. It can become part of your style and part of the way you go about your craft. And to me, that's really, really important. So in the end, what's my advice? Go buy a jointer first, then go buy a planer second, and don't forget to get yourself a resaw sooner or later. But don't forget to stock up on good, sharp hand planes. I hope you got some useful information out of the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you put a like on the video and maybe subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching.